Oh, exciting. So this is the first episode where we're going to be looking at a specific question,
Yeah,
which can be asked inside of Carrero to really get that sort of conversation started. So I'm excited about this.
I know, me too. We're starting off with arguably, if you were going to ask one question, what question would it be? This would probably be my question of choice. Um, for me, yes. I'm sure most people will be familiar with an NPS, so customer net promoter score, and how that works. That's something that's been around for a really, really long time. And actually, if you're looking at what you want to know about your customers, then surely it's just as important that you know this about the people that work for you. I think we've said before that, you know, a lot of organizations know more about their customers than they do about their employees. For a number of reasons, this is a really important question. So we call this, the question is that, would I recommend this as a great place to work? Would I recommend working here to a friend? You can frame it in a few different ways, but essentially what we're doing is we're looking for advocacy. So this is, how likely are you to, tell somebody, yeah, there's a job here, come and work here. And it's always asked on a 1 to 10 scale. Only a 3 there, Liam. We'd have to have had a chat about that one. It's a 1 to 10 question, but it works in a different way from most questions that we asked on Carrero, and most questions, when this question is asked on a survey, in that you take it's divided into 3 areas. So from 1 to 6, if you score 1 to 6, you're a detractor. If you score 7 or 8, you're what's known as passive. And if you score 9 and 10, you're a promoter. And the way the employer net promoter score is worked out is that you take your promoters and you minus the detractors. And then you're left with a number, ignore the passives, you're left with a number between minus 100 and plus 100. So when we talk about employee net promoter score, when we're asking this question, the outcome of that is to understand your advocacy from minus 100 to plus 100. So we never talk about this question in terms of percentages unless we're converting it to, build a suite of analytics. Then we might convert it back to a percentage. But usually an organisation will want to know where they land in terms of anything plus is good. Don't get disheartened. Anything between, anything 20 to 30, 20 to 50 probably is really, really good. Anything above 50 is, excellent. That's a lot of people scoring a 9 or a 10. It's a really, I'd say, this question is super important. It often gets asked anonymously. And so I think that's where Carrero is quite different, because when you're doing it as part of your process as a career conversation, it gives leaders or managers the opportunity to sit down and say, well, what would make you recommend this? So a lot of our questions are a 1 to 10 scale, for the pure reason that, the conversation is then, well, what would make you a 10? And that can open up a lot of really great conversation. Some people will never score a 10. We get this a lot with clients with employee net promoter score when it's on the lower side. And they're like, but people don't realise how it's worked out. And, it's not fair, it's not fair because so few people score, 9s and 10s. And I get that. It is, however, a really consistent measure that everybody measures the same way. So if you say to an employer, what's your eNPS? Really, they have to work it out the same way, which is very different when you say to somebody, what's your engagement score? What's your labour turnover? It's a metric that is so set in the way that it's calculated that it's one of the areas where you can look, across industry, across organisation. And yeah, you are going to have some people that never score 9 or 10, but you're going to have some people that never score 9 or 10 in any organisation. So, I think it takes that into account. The variables are, do you ask it anonymously? Do you ask it, as in Carrero, do you ask it where people will be able to see your responses? And also, how's it framed? if you ask the employee net promoter question in a survey, it's a very different from going, please be totally honest with us. We really want to improve how we work as an organisation, from, hey, we're entering best places to work in hospitality, the Sunday Times or whatever. And, wouldn't you like to be a great place to work at work? Answer these questions so context is really important where you're asking it when you're looking at the results and benchmarking. I think that really came home to me. Feed It Back had done one where they just went out to everybody in the industry, and their employee net promoter score, I think, came in, it was low. It was probably, in the positive, but in the low. And best workplaces in hospitality last year, the employee net promoter score average for that was plus 61. So you can see there's a huge difference there depending on the context in which you ask people. So, I can go out and say, yeah, the industry average, for people that enter best places to work in hospitality is plus 61. But actually that doesn't, you have to think about, well, all those organisations are putting themselves into that pool because they are a best place to work. So clearly it's going to be higher than actual averages. So, there's a bit around that, but I would say that it's probably one of the more robust measures out there in terms of people and engagement. And in fact, you can just have a really interesting conversation with somebody.
The first thing that struck me about what you said was, it seems like the bar is quite high. Obviously, it's correct based on all the work you've done over the years. But to say, did you say that 7 and 8 is passive? Yeah, instinctively to me that seems like really high. If somebody gave me an 8 out of 10, I'd think, brilliant. That's really good.
Because the point of this, and it was a marketing exercise when it first came out, is that what you're looking for from customers when you do an NPS, which is worked out in the same way, is what you're looking at is net promoters, and promoting is all about advocacy. So only people that, and there was lots of research done on it, only people that score 9 and 10, they're the people that are going to go out and say, oh my God, I went to this most amazing restaurant yesterday. For example, yesterday I went to a new sort of pizza place in where I live, and literally had the best pizza I've ever had in my life. Now, I've already told 2 or 3 people about that. Would I have done it if it was a 7 or 8? No, probably not. Would I have, and maybe I would have told you about it if it was a 3 or a 4, because I would have been, oh my God, don't go there. So the passives are, yeah, it's really good. I had a really good time, but it wasn't the best experience that I've had. And therefore, I probably wouldn't be going to all my mates and saying, you should come here. And that translates to the workplace, right? How many people do you know that are genuinely going out and saying, oh my God, there's a job at my company, come and work here, it's bloody amazing. That's what we're looking for. So promoters. So yes, it's high because it has to be high, because to say to a family or a friend member, come and work here, you're placing your trust in that person that it's a genuinely great place to work. In the same way as if I've recommended this pizza, if they go and have a shit experience, they'll be like, Joe, that was a crap pizza. I was like, oh, I've lost some credibility there by recommending it. So it has to be really good for somebody to psychologically recommend. And, I think from a marketing perspective, we've known that advocacy is everything. It's, word of mouth, especially now over the last 20 years, you've seen how much people talking about their experience from either a customer or an employee point of view is so key to the success of a business. Because you can post it somewhere. I mean, nothing I do or say is going to go viral, but you don't know who's walking into your restaurant or coming to get a job or what they do. One of my clients is like a food blogger. He's got like thousands and thousands of followers, and you wouldn't necessarily know that when somebody comes to work with you or when somebody walks into your restaurant. So to work towards everybody being an advocate is, yes, super, super important.
I guess the obvious question for me is, when would you ask this? How long should somebody be with you before you start asking this question?
I mean, I would ask it I would ask it almost as soon as you possibly can, because you want to understand what it's like through the induction period, right? So if somebody comes and works for you, you want to know in that first month, would you recommend this? And that will depend on what they're have they walked in and had a really warm welcome? Do they know what's going on in the rest of the business? Do they have the right uniform? Do they understand who they report into? Do they understand the parameters of the job? If you go in and have a really amazing experience in your first 4 weeks and you're asked this question, A, you're getting some feedback about, well, what could make us better? But B, you're understanding from that person's perspective that you're doing a really, really good job. And then ask at 8 weeks, and then ask at 12 weeks, and then ask every 3 months. And if you see trends where, for example, everyone might have an amazing first 4 weeks, and then at 12 it drops, what's happening in that time period? So it's something on Carrero that we like to measure over time, because, it's good as a standalone stat, but actually who and where and, how are you moving the dial, and what does that look like? And how is it, when we see clients who, an eNPS in a site drops, we can usually correlate that to a leadership change or something happening in the wider business or something happening locally. You don't necessarily know what that is, but it's a good reflection on the health, usually on the health of your business. When you're looking at it from a site level or a business level. From an individual level, like, how nice is it to sit down with somebody and them to say, to be asked that question, and then for somebody to sit down and say, well, what would make you recommend us? How valuable is that information as a leader to understand about the people that work with you? So I think it's often only used as part of a survey process and therefore anonymous. And I think where we ask it as part of a wider conversation where you're sitting down and actually talking to people about it. And even if you've asked it in the survey, it's still important to ask it, I think, when you're having a career conversation. And some people say, oh, it should be one or the other, or people have already asked that question. And also you'll get different results because people know it's anonymous versus not anonymous. However, just being able to have that conversation with somebody is, what privilege to understand. Well, you tell me what would make you a 10? Maybe nothing, but there's usually something that would make it better for someone.
So, if somebody is using Carrero, is this triggered at certain milestones?
Yeah. So, we can ask this question. So, one of our clients asks it as a pulse. So, they do a pulse survey. Every 3 months, they just ask this question and this question alone. And then there's visibility, but we tend to include it in every single, we call them journeys, in every single journey. So at least 4 times a year, people have the opportunity to answer that question and to have a conversation around it. It's one of the only ones that I would recommend asking quite a lot, because it depends as well, doesn't it? It's really hard with tech because you're getting a moment in time. So something might happen today that would mean, yeah, oh my God, this is so amazing. I just got a pay rise. They've just given me an ice cream. Oh, this benefit just landed that I've always wanted. And yeah, today I'd definitely recommend you. And then you might have a really bad day and you might not, so it can't, it's, we're picking up something at a moment in time. And I think it's important to recognize that as well. And there's always a really fine balance between how often we ask something and therefore, oh my God, they're asking me this question again, versus, it's important to have that conversation and to talk to people about it.
So I'm just going to bring the question back up again so I can have a little look at how it's worded in this example. So you mentioned that this could be reworded. So at the moment, it's the way it's currently worded is, I'd recommend this as a great place to work for others. So in what circumstances would you change that?
The obvious one to me is that we would put in the company name there. So I'd recommend Rose's Tie, the Ned, whatever, as a great place to work for others. It's, I think, in its purest form, It's supposed to be, I'd recommend this to family and friends. And we've changed that because a lot of people look at it and say, well, I don't want my sister, brother, daughter working here because I quite like separating my work and my life. So
Yeah.
I think it can be taken literally, as in, well, I don't have any friends that want to be in hospitality, therefore, no, I wouldn't recommend. So it's just about, it's the sentiment of the question rather than the really specific wording. In some questions, and we'll go on to talk about them, it's really important to get the wording absolutely right. With this question, it's very much about having a conversation with my client, so whoever's working with us on this, and saying, what do we think will land best in this business, based on what they know about how their people are. So yeah, it's always that question, and the exact words, yeah, vary, I would say.
It's almost like you could put so much information in that you're almost asking a different question. So if you were to
Yes,
put in there, for example, would you recommend friends and family? In somebody's mind, they might start answering a slightly different question, which is, how much do you want to work with friends and family?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly
Okay.
that. Yeah. Because the consumer version, the customer version, of course you're going to recommend to friends and family unless you're some massive influencer. You're not recommending to anyone else, really, are you? So in that context, that works better. In this context, I think it's just recommending it to others. It's almost I call it, the standing at the bar. When you're standing at the bar and, you're a couple deep and you end up just randomly chatting to the person next to you, and they might go, oh, what do you do? How do you answer that question about where you work? Or they say, where do you work? What's it like? And you go, oh my God, it's amazing. It comes back to advocacy. That's what you want. You want people to be saying, this is where I want to be. I think at one point when we were way back when we were interviewing for somebody in the tech team, and we were asking, what would be your ideal place? And everybody said Google. At that point, that was just the bar. Everybody wanted to go and work for Google. And that really interested me because they'd just done so much work on getting their employer brand right that people just had this perception that Google was a great place to work. I don't know whether it is or it isn't, but there seemed to be that energy around it that it was like, we want to go and work for Google. Virgin, the same, actually. And to the point where it's almost detrimental. And I remember speaking to the CEO of Virgin Active at the time, it was quite a while ago. And he said, the employer branding is so strong that literally everyone thinks they're going to be having breakfast with Richard Branson when they're cleaning swimming pool drains. And that, you have to combat that as well. But, there are some people that get their advocacy because they've done they've got a great employer brand. But usually that employer brand comes from people saying to their friends, saying to their family, yeah, like, this is a great place to work. This is, for whatever reason, this is amazing. And it doesn't matter why, it just matters that it is.
Okay. So let's imagine the listener takes this question away. They decide to start asking it in their own business. I guess we need to do something with that data, right? So talk to us. I think firstly, let's do it in two sort of stages. What does somebody with Carrero how do with this data? How is it presented, and what can they do with it? And then after that, let's talk about maybe somebody who's not quite ready yet to use Carrero. What can they do? So, what somebody with Carrero first?
So we can use it in two ways. So if you've got Carrero, there's analytics that just show you, it's a little diagram of people that are filled up to a certain level. So you can see very quickly from an organizational perspective, point of view, who, what percentage of people are detractors, passives and promoters. And you can drill down into that data. I don't know if you've got it
I
there.
haven't put it on this. No.
No, you're not set up as a manager. I have to get Sean to sort that out for you.
Keep promoting.
Yeah. So yeah, note for next time, we'll get the analytics up there for you. So you can see, and then you can drill down. So you could look at that by site level. So if I was a multi-site business, I'd be looking at my eNPS by site on a quarterly basis. And then just looking at how, it's not necessarily what it is, it's how it compares to last time you did it and where people fall. So, 2 years ago now, we went into an organization, like brilliant organization, like such a people-focused business, and they were having challenges in one particular site. And we looked at their employee net promoter score, and their one team, it was -100, which I've never seen before. And it just gave us the data to then be able to go in and tackle that and talk to that team and find out what was going on. And, it ended up being a leadership issue, and it was dealt with. And a year later, they were all back into the positive. So, it's an early indication of where you need to go in and tackle stuff. So I'd say that, GMs and anybody sort of above that, GMs, ops, board, really look at how's it shaping out within the organization. Yeah, look at the overall score, but actually how's that made up? What's going on in your business? And look, your managers will be having conversations using Carrera. You will be having conversations with your people about what they've said and what they think. And I suppose my biggest piece of advice is do something with that information, because, you sit there and you say to somebody, what would make you a 10? And it's something that's achievable, and then it doesn't happen. That's just disengaging. It's worse than even asking the question in the first place. So I think as a business, you have to be ready to give your leaders the flexibility and give them the, oh my God, the word's gone out of my menopausal head.
Need to be allowed to basically have these conversations, don't they?
Empowerment.
Yeah.
Empower them. That's the word.
Good word. Took a while to get there, but it's a good word.
It did take a word to get there. And I do know that word, Liam. I have used it quite a lot in my career. Just my brain isn't working today. So if you're empowering your leaders to do stuff to make that difference within the framework of what you can and can't do in the business, that's really powerful. It's the little things. Sometimes we'll go on to talk about this more when we talk about other questions. But, if somebody says what would make it a 10, and what would make it a 10 is, we don't have enough teaspoons, and every day I'm getting asked for teaspoons and it's really creating a bad guest experience. Buy some bloody teaspoons. Sometimes it's the smallest things that make the biggest difference to people. And you don't know that unless you have the conversation. And a survey can tell you that, but you're not having one-to-one conversations with people. So it's taking it to the next level, I think, by asking these types of questions within a format that people do talk about it afterwards.
Yeah. So obviously Carrero makes it really simple to do that, because it automates all the dashboard for you and everything, and then I'm sure it brings out the analytics much faster than somebody who was doing it in another way. But if somebody's listening and they just maybe just want to try this themselves first before they maybe reach out to Carrero, have you got any advice for somebody who could just get this up and running maybe this week, next week?
I mean, I think in terms of the conversation piece, it's just, get a bit of paper and write down 5 things that you would really like to know. And again, we'll go over some more of those questions that we recommend. This would be one of them. So if you're not, using technology, or you're not having regular conversations with people around their careers, then, just have a coffee chat with somebody every 3 months and think of 5 questions and sit down and talk to them about it and do something with the results. That's just something that everybody can do, and you don't necessarily need a system. It's like, I could sit here now and say, Liam, what's it like to work at Pillar? If I asked you from a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put that on whether you would recommend it to somebody else to work? And they'll probably have a little think about it, and they'll be like, oh, probably a 7. You'd be like, oh gosh, okay, so what do you think it would take to get you to a 10? And it's literally just that. If you want to record it, I mean, I'm sure that, there are you could, I think you probably do it within SurveyMonkey or something like that. I'm sure there's ways that you could sort of use tech without engaging us. It's one of those ones, if you're doing surveys, ask this in a survey, because it's starting to get people used to this question as something that they might want to think about. I always think, even when you're just having a conversation with somebody, and we do it a lot in facilitation, is you can ask people, for a yes or a no, or you can even ask an open-ended question. If I came on here this morning and I say, "How are you, Liam?" you're probably just going to go, "Yeah, I'm good," or "Yeah, fine," or "Oh yeah, it's a bit shit at the moment." That might be a response. Whereas if I said to you, "Right, okay, so 1 is I'm feeling the worst I've ever felt in my life, and 10 is this is the best day I'm ever going to have," where would you fall? Because at that point, I'm your line manager, and I'll know you. You're going to, maybe say a 5. And if usually you're a 7, I'm going to think, "Oh gosh, that rings a few alarm bells. Let's dig into this a bit more." If you're usually a 7 and you go 9, I'll be like, "Yay, why is that? What's happened? What's going well?" And it's just a way of getting to know somebody better and making people think about what they're talking about, rather than just off the cuff. The number of people that say to me, "But I know my people really well." Do you? Do you really? How often do you really sit down and take the time to have those conversations? So, this is an important question. Would you recommend us, maybe to wrap up a conversation? But the first thing to do, sit down with your people and have conversations with them, about their happiness, their satisfaction at work, their welfare, what they want to do with their lives. It's that simple. But away from the workplace, not as you're, serving 3 people at the bar and just having a bit of a chat, and note it down somewhere, so next time you remember it and you talk to them about it. It sounds really obvious, but it doesn't happen as much as it should do, I don't think. And it's also showing somebody that you really care about them by taking them out of the business to grab a cup of coffee and ask them how they are. I don't know how many people do and don't do that, but
100%. It's definitely something which is undervalued and underrated. So the last sort of question I was thinking of was, let's say then I'm a really busy manager or busy owner of a small restaurant chain or whatever. I've got 100 employees. I've sent the survey out. I've got all my responses, and I've got obviously those 100 people plotted at various points across 1 to 10. Where should I spend most of my time? Should I spend most of my time trying to get the 7s and the 8s to 9s, or should I first focus maybe on people who put 3 and 4? Should I focus on the 9s and the 10s last because I know they're happy? How should I spend my time?
Very good question. I think I would always be looking to get passives. The quick wins are getting passives to promoters. So, and they're the people that probably could go either way. How that said, if you've got somebody that's scoring like a 1, 2, 3 on would I recommend this as a great place to work, or would I recommend working here to others, I'd be very concerned about those people. I'd be looking at who they are and why they're like that, and having that conversation. Again, if it's an anonymous survey, you can't really do that much about it. And anecdotally, people tend to be more honest if it's anonymous, because they don't have to sit with their manager and then explain it. But when you're using Carrero, anyone that's putting, a 1 to 6, they know that they're going to have to justify that, and they want to have their voice heard. So, yeah, in the case of using Carrero, I'd be careful about the people that are scoring really low, because if they're willing to sit and have a conversation with their manager about why they're a 1 or a 2, then they're willing to talk to other people about it. And therefore, that negative energy. And look, I don't believe that anybody is necessarily a bad employee or a bad person. I just think that sometimes people aren't in the right environment for them. And it's your responsibility as a leader or a manager to help them work out where is the right environment for them. And, there are so many organisations that I love and admire, but I absolutely wouldn't be able to work there because their values aren't necessarily aligned to mine, or, there's loads of different reasons why people might be scoring a 1, 2, 3, or 4. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it does mean that action needs to be taken. So
Because probably the answer probably depends, isn't it? Like most things. I guess if you've got 1, 2s, or 3s, my intuition would probably be to go and sort them out first, because that could spread, couldn't it? That could be a toxicity which could spread quite easily.
exactly. And I think it's, you're in the premise of Carrero, certainly your leaders are having those conversations. So that person is going to be talked to about that. And it's back to empowering the managers and the leaders to be able to do something to move the dial, or to know where to go to look at that, or to be able to have that conversation with someone. If I was about to walk into a conversation with somebody that worked for me and they were putting a 2 or a 3, if I hadn't led anybody before, that might be I have the capacity to see that before the meeting. I might go and ask a more senior leader or a mentor or, somebody in the people team, or this person's this. I suspect it might be because of X, Y, Z. Can I have some help with how you would have this conversation if they don't feel very confident about it? And again, it comes back to, if somebody is saying they wouldn't recommend you as somewhere to work, and they've got a really clear reason for it, it's about working out whether that's something you're ever going to be able to fix, or something that is fixable. And if it's fixable, as an employer or as a leader, you have a responsibility to treat that like you would treat your own goals. It's like, well, let's put a timeline in place as to when that will be sorted out, or let's talk about what we can do, or maybe it's explaining why something is the way that it is. There are always reasons why things happen in the workplace. Where a lot of people fall down is that they don't communicate that. So, a decision will be made. By the time it gets down to, an assistant manager or somebody working behind a bar, the why is lost, and suddenly we just don't have this benefit anymore. And then it's like, well, what do you mean we don't have that anymore? Oh, someone abused it. Oh my God. Well, that means they don't trust us all. So whereas if you understand why decisions are being made, and that's the job of the leaders, then sometimes that can move the dial too. So a lot of this stuff is leadership and communication as much as anything.
Perfect. Awesome. Is there anything we haven't covered on that question?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, as I said before, it's one of the only metrics where the way that it is calculated is so recognised that it is one place where you can benchmark, and you can benchmark against other organisations. But I would only benchmark the Carrero Employee Net Promoter Score against another Carrero Employee Net Promoter Score, or a survey against a survey, or a Best Places to Work in Hospitality award submission against a Best Places to Work in Hospitality award submission, because of context.
Perfect. So a quick note to the listener, as always, Joe's details will be in the show notes. So if you've got any questions, or you want to find out about Carrero, or maybe, you want to know how to calculate that really complex calculation she told us about at the beginning, I'm sure she'll be able to do that for you as well. So please reach out to Joe.
It's not that complex, but yes.
Joe, thank you so much for your time. Really, really insightful as always. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
See you next time.